Good evening, welcome to the Dearborn Board of Education School District of the City of Dearborn. This is a regular scheduled board study session. It is 6:04 and I'll call the meeting to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Trustee D'Ambrosio.
Here.
Trustee McDonald.
Here.
Trustee Moses.
Here.
Trustee Petchikoff.
Here.
Trustee Thorpe.
Here.
Trustee Watts here. President Barry.
Here, next item, please.
Pledge of allegiance to the flag. President Barry will lead the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Citizen participation. Citizens wishing to address the board on agenda and non-agenda items for action who are signed in by 6:10 p.m. by submitting a blue card to the board secretary may speak at this time. The board may not be in a position to respond to non-agenda items. Therefore, speakers should not anticipate immediate response to their comments or questions. For the benefit of all concerned, do not mention the names of students or school district employees. Please keep your comments as brief as possible. There is a 3-minute time limit on comments made to the board. We do not have any blue cards.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Discussion, potential bond.
Thank you. Dr. Maliko, floor is yours.
Thank you. So just to get us started, I have Mr. Wall and Mr. Mustonen here. Just we want to get back into discussion following the report last year and the millage that we had passed, which we put on hold, potential infrastructure from February, and then we knew, we would get started this year with the needs that we have in infrastructure. So it's important that we do that, I think, for the sustainability long-term of the district. And so we got a lot of work still to do, but we've also done a lot of the work. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Wall and Mr. Mustonen.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maliko. President Barry, Board Trustees, Ms. Harris. So tonight, we just want to kind of go over things and get us back to get our minds and get us focused again on this discussion. Tonight, we'll talk a little bit about, as you know, we were very successful. Our community was very supportive and was successful in passing the millage renewal, our operating millage renewal. And so with the passage of that, we were able, we're now able to move our attention back to where we were prior to that millage renewal process. And that is talking about the infrastructure and instructional needs of our buildings in a long-term kind of view. So tonight, Mr. Wall here will go over some of the financial aspects of where we are and where we've been, and then we can talk about our needs, and we'll reacquaint everybody with the study that was done by Fielding International, who was in our district for about 8 months, that were with us and collected a lot of good data and a lot of good community feedback. And then, of course, this is a board study session, so we look forward to your discussion and your input that will provide the administration with further guidance.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, David. President Barry, members of the board, we prepared a very brief PowerPoint for you, just kind of give you some of the data again to kind of refresh your memory. And for those that are tuning in, have an idea of how infrastructure works and how schools are funded. The state of Michigan does not give us any money for infrastructure. They give us a money per pupil for operational procedures, and there is no funding that comes directly from the state for funding. They've started that discussion at the state level, but it's still years away from impacting us. And in the past, districts would have to go out for a bond issue if they want to raise funds. Some districts, like us, have contributed money from our operating fund, and that averages from like 1 to 2% of your fund balance, or your operational budget would go to capital needs. Some have taken the path of doing a sinking fund, where they could actually raise money on pay-as-you-go type basis. That is up to 5 mils for, they keep changing the number of years, 10 to 20 years, I can't remember what the actual date is. And they would raise a mill each year, or up to 5 mils, and use that money for capital improvements, and for the limit to what that dollar could raise any given year. The district in Dearborn has done bond issues. So I'm going to show the first graph here, that kind of shows the history of how we funded schools in the past. So you'll see different colors of graph here. Anything in green was a voter-approved bond. So that's when we've gone to the public and had a referendum on the ballot, and the voters approved us having a bond issue. So you can see the green bars are by far and away the biggest source of income we've had for capital improvement. You'll see in the red section, so when the district can sometimes do non-voter approved bonds, but we have to pay that from our general fund money. So it comes away from our operational funds. And that's usually when we're trying to do a smaller project that we don't have the cash flow reserve to pay it in a current year, so we kind of spread it out, kind of like a mortgage. We spread it out over 5 or 10 years to pay that money back out of our operating funds. You'll see the orange button. I'll make sure my color matches up there. The orange button is our enhancement millage. Back about 8 years now, the Wayne County approved an enhancement millage for all the schools in Wayne County. And the money gets raised at the county level and gets given back to us on a per pupil basis. So we've used a lot of that money for capital improvement through that process. You'll see public contributions. You probably won't see it because it's so small. Those are monies we would get from a source to actually do some kind of improvement. The most recent example that AK Steel gave us some money to do some improvements at Salina Intermediate for air-conditioned air in the buildings. And the last one is yellow. So the yellow is what we recently gone through with ESSER funds. We were able to capture some of those ESSER funds to use for capital improvement that dealt with air handling. So it's very specific, but we could have done that. So you'll see that mostly you'll see blue and yellow and a little bit of orange in the most recent years, because that's how we've been able to fund capital improvement. So as you can see, our last bond, the first side of the sheet is 2002 and 2003. We did 2 series of bonding back then. We had our 2014 bond that we did, and those are the last bonding issues we've had. And I'll show you later on our millage rates that when we go out for a bond, we raised our debt millage for the repayment of those bonds, and I'll show you a history of that later on in this presentation. But you can see we're able to do a lot of bit of money with the ESSER funds, and the ESSER funds also offset some of our operational costs. So we're able to take some of that and move that into that. You'll see a little section of the red in the recent years. That's the energy bond improvement we're doing. It's something that the district's going to pay back, but we're changing LED lights, regular to LED lights, changing some of our HVAC equipment, which generates savings that we use back to pay that. But again, it comes out of our operating fund, so that's why that's a red. I just want to make sure you're aware, because if you were watching the board meetings the last couple of years, you heard us talk about an energy bond. It's not a voter-approved bond, but it's a general fund bond that we pay back. Any questions on that slide? The only other thing of note going forward,
One
as
second.
you can see,
Trustee Thorpe?
oh, sorry.
The numbers on this slide, are these adjusted for inflation, or is this the amounts when
The
they were
actual
passed?
amounts, yes.
Okay, thanks.
And you see 24 and 26, 25, 26, 26, 27. We're only estimating that we can afford what we can out of that 1 to 2% of our general fund to actually make capital improvements going forward. So it's going to be very limited on that. All right. So the next slide. So what we did is we collected data from the school districts noted on the bottom. Those are the larger school districts and some of those in the recent area that we get compared to a lot. And the orange line is the amount of bonding, just bonding, that they've done over the years. The gray line is taking the average of all these districts on a per pupil basis and shows based on the size, if you're comparable to all these bigger districts, what you should have bonded that's comparable to everything else. So if you want to go to the next slide real quick and we'll come back. So this is the actual amount that you show on the student enrollment, the names obviously, the student enrollment, what they actually bonded over the last 25 years, and taking the average, the last column shows you what you should have bonded if you're being up to pace and comparable to those districts. So you see over the 25 years, we've had 226 million, we're third from the bottom at 19,578 students for last year. According to that average per student, we should be at 878 million if we kept pace with other districts that are similar in our per pupil basis. Can you go back now? So going back to the other slide, just for the perception of it, you can see we're third from the right. Our orange line is limited based upon our actual bonding, and the gray line represents what we've actually, if we bonded comparable to the districts that we showed. So you can see that we're well behind a lot of those that are similar in nature like us. Any questions on that one? All right, if you want to go forward too then.
Okay.
Nope, you missed one. Nope. Oh, I got my slides backwards. All right. That's all right. So this is a snapshot of the actual, this is 2 years old, because we haven't updated since prior to the operational millage that we've done. Shows you the actual debt millage and sinking fund millage to districts. You'll see where that little red arrow is at. This was 2 years ago. 2 years ago, we were at 3.5 mils. Now we're at 1.35 mils. So we've actually dropped lower than this was 2 years ago. As you can see, the blue is highlighted for those that run sinking millage. You can see how they kind of pay for some of theirs as they pay as they go in the sinking fund. And the green is the debt millage for those that went out for an actual referendum to their voters for bonding. So you can see ours is pretty low, and if you actually look at our current rate at 1.35, we're lower than anybody else in that comparable Wayne County area for bonding. So, and the story I'm trying to tell, obviously, is that we're behind the normal process for bonding for schools. That's the overall message. I'm trying to show you the statistical data. And there's a variety of reasons, but whatever the reasons are, I just want to kind of show you statistically we're way behind on keeping up with our infrastructure. Next one.
A quick question.
Yes.
The 1.35 mils, when is that set scheduled to drop off?
2030.
2030, thank you.
Yep. So we're about 4 or 5 years away from actually getting it down to zero.
Can I
And it was
just-
based on the 2014 bond and the 20-year
That's
life
what's
of
left
those
over.
payment of those bonds.
I would just add too that one of the things I know that we got into the pandemic. After the 19 bond, we were looking at coming back, but the pandemic came. It wasn't the right time. Inflation. So one of the things we did, if you saw on, I want to go back, Tom, if you could, to the graph that showed our bonding and our ESSER fund. If you can put that one up there. I think we were responsible in trying to save and using the sources we had. We knew that year we needed to put money from the ESSER dollars that were part of the COVID relief into summer school and instruction, social workers, other things. We obviously were very careful that we did one time, but one of the things we added a significant number between 40 to 45 million from the ESSER that went into infrastructure as a responsibility to also save the local taxpayers by using some of those federal dollars. Now that federal dollars is no longer there, and we're left with the general fund, potentially Wayne County enhancement millage, which is up for, I know, renewal by Wayne County in November. So I just wanted to comment on those things.
Thank you.
Question?
Trustee Moser?
Yeah. So you're saying we are behind as far as bonding?
Correct. Comparable
so-
to districts our size and in our county.
So if we go 4 years ago, what would have been the number that we wanted to be at in order to be at par, or at least to be, for both graphs to be the same, or both bars to be the same?
And back in 2019, we were going out, our mill rate at that time was 4.82. We were looking at extending that 4.82 at no millage increase to our constituents, and that would have raised $240 million.
We still would have been.
It still would have been lower than, or higher than we were, but still just over half of what we would have been comparable to other districts.
And it would have still kept the taxpayers at a rate that they had been paying
Correct.
already.
And I think our need, the study that you had, was a little over 500 million at the time to get us
Correct.
up, but we made the strategic decision not to do that at the
Yeah, we
time.
didn't want to go for the full amount at that time because we didn't want to raise the millage, but we were able
Right.
to maintain what we had on the millage rate and still do a significant improvement to our building. All right. Now if you want to go. All right, this is just showing over time our actual millage rate that we do for schools. There's 3 components. There's the debt retirement, which is what we're paying on our 2014 bonds. There's the homestead portion. That's our operational millage that we levy to keep our full foundation allowance, and the non-homestead, which is 18 mills on non-homestead property, which are your businesses, your second homes, apartment complexes, things like that. So our highest rate was back in 2013. We are roughly 6.17 mills for operating, 18 for the non-homestead millage, and 5.35 for debt. If you scroll all the way to the right now, we're currently at 18 mills for the non-homestead, 2.35 for operating, and 1.35 for debt. So that's a difference of roughly about 7.8 mills from where we were at our highest point since the last kind of 10 years. I just kind of want to show you the historical pattern. So we have been trying to be very diligent and lowering that tax rate, because that's something we heard in 2019, is to lower it and come out with a long-term plan before you come out to us. And as David mentioned earlier, that's why we did the fielding study, to kind of look at a long-term structure of what we need to apply and kind of make sure we have a good solid plan in place. Right, and you see the gray is non-homestead. All school districts in Michigan levy those 18 mills. They have to do that to get our full foundation allowance. If we don't levy the full 18, we lose operational revenue from our foundation allowance. So they're giving us, $9,000 for our foundation allowance. We'd only be able to get $8,000 from the state. They don't make up the difference. We
I
levy
was going
less
to say,
than 18
make sure
mills.
everybody understands, yeah, they don't, the state will not make up the difference if we
Correct.
do not levy it.
Yes. So now, obviously, I believe, you have the link to the fielding report, which gives us a lot of data on our needs. That was roughly a little like 1.2 billion from what they assessed based on looking at our physical needs for our current buildings. They had recommendations about old versus new, and they talked about different programs. But I think that having that discussion today kind of precedents what we need to talk about today is how we want to move forward. So one of the things we're looking for as administration is we need to, because the board back in the spring of 23 heard the fielding report, and they even recommended that we need to go back out to the public and get their input on where they want us to, as a district, to go. So I don't think it's really our point right now to discuss old versus new or what needs to be improved. We have to now that the field long-term study is done, we need to get the public input, staff input, and where we need to go going forward for Dearborn schools going for the next 30 years. With that, I'll turn it back over to the board to see how they want to go forward.